Talks Television. I'm Carolyn Topol, and this is my fabulous co-host, Rachel Arnett.
Hello.
And today we are finishing our series on family viewing through the decades.
Aww.
Finally over, and you're with it and alive and a
finally-
mom during this period of time.
Finally.
Because we're going to go through all the 2000s, so 2000 till now. And some shows we're going to notice overlapped from the 90s, because there were some really long-running shows that started in the 90s, mid and late 90s. And there's just a whole bunch happening. And now that it's getting near the end of the year, some things are tying stuff up, and especially the short runs are going to have their hiatus coming up now. So you get a lot of time to go back and on demand those things you may have missed.
Oh, yes.
While everybody's sitting home and trying to stay warm at night.
Exactly.
So I'm going to start with a show that I think really earned and deserved all the accolades it had, and that was The Office.
Love it. It was such a favorite when I was in college. Like it was one of the shows that everybody was talking about.
And I think part of it was that it really appealed to everybody. The demographic was so broad. Anybody in your family could watch it, and they could get something out of it. Now, I'm not saying put your toddler in front of the show The Office.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for evening viewing with the family, you could get it at this level. You could get the undercurrents. You could get the sexual tensions.
But it was never a show that was very overt in really any direction.
No.
There were some things that I think, if I watched it with my son, I would have to kind of talk him through because they were using sarcasm as a tool or dramatic irony. So, especially with the character of Michael, who would constantly say and do things that were totally inappropriate. Like, you might have to have a conversation, but it wasn't a show that I would be afraid if he turned it on by accident.
I totally agree with you. And I think the difference between The Office, which was born in England, the original show was from England, and starred Ricky Gervais, I think that show really recognized his caustic humor, some of the nasty edge he brings to things, and he just never became a warm, loving character in The Office in England. Whereas Steve Carell brought the American version of The Office to a whole different place because his character, which was the same character Ricky Gervais played, added a vulnerability.
It was a very American, I think, kind of take.
Yes.
The original British series was, again, the way British TV, very short series, very dry sense of humor. Ricky Gervais's character was just kind of a bumbling idiot, and that's who he's supposed to be. And not for lack of
mean
trying.
and nasty otherwise, and sometimes mean and
Sometimes,
nasty.
yeah. Even the other characters that transferred, like Jim and Pam, the characters that were their version in England, it was just different. It was drier. There wasn't as much physical humor. It was a lot more quick, witty, verbal.
And I think what we got in the United States, because of the structure of how the U.S. does programming, is we got this beautiful, with Jim and Pam, developing romance. We got to see it, a huge arc over a number of years, and the setbacks and the move forwards. And as we've talked about before, we didn't get that gratifying end till the end of the series when they chose to say, we are done. You didn't have to have this downslide at the end where everybody's bored with the series.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, shows that are written by the actors, which The Office was, which some people still don't know and talk about.
Right.
The writers on the show were Mindy Kaling, were B.J. Novak, were I can't remember his name, of the gentleman who played Toby. Like these actors were also the writers. They knew these characters better than anyone. So there also weren't those moments where you'd sit there and go, wait, why did he just say that? That's totally uncharacteristic.
And in some ways, it was familiar in the way that SNL would feel right, because while Saturday Night Live has a huge cadre of writers, they also consulted with the comics doing the show.
Absolutely.
They weren't going to sit there and say, we're going to write your comedy for you, when these people were successful comedians on their own.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I've always found interesting about The Office is there was actually a lot less improvisation than you'd think. Given that these are all brilliant comedians
Yes.
and sketch comedians, Mindy Kaling to me, like every show she's done in the 2000s is a winner for me. Mindy Project, Champions, they're all amazing. They just
and yet, you know,
they wrote good scripts.
and I
they
think
acted
that's what
them
it was.
well.
Yeah, that they wrote because they participated and they were the writers. They knew what they were writing, so they didn't have to improvise to make it feel better. It already felt good.
Yeah.
Because they wrote it.
Exactly. And sometimes they would try a few different things. If there was something that wasn't working on the spot, they'd try a few things. But you could just, when you watch the bloopers from the show, which I may or may not do on a regular basis, it's just really funny to see them pop out of character because I totally believe that Rainn Wilson is the character from The Office.
There you
100%.
go.
Like every time I see him in another movie, I'm very confused.
So make sure you check out YouTube, The Office bloopers. That's all you have to do, keywords, and you'll get a whole bunch of fun
Oh,
times.
absolutely.
That you may not want to watch, though, with the family.
No, there is some language. There's definitely some language.
Or some implied language.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on, there's some interesting shows that popped up, and you know how they always used to say there were certain nights of the week for viewing on certain
yeah.
networks.
Thursday comedy on NBC.
Right. And it used to be ABC was the comedy with Happy Days and those shows. Okay, now we're going to pop into Wednesday night. And Wednesday night we had a series of interesting family shows and of 3 very different families. There's the Goldbergs, there is Blackish, and there's Modern Family. Wow. Talk about family viewing taken from
exactly.
A to Z, and you could all watch it with your families.
Yeah.
It wasn't about families that became risque.
Yeah. It always kind of stayed in that very safe pocket of I can watch this and they're going to talk about tough issues. They're going to have that Full House music gets quiet and contemplative moment, but without that contemplative music. The episode always has something that I could later discuss with Zach if I wanted to.
And Zach being a 5-year-old, it wasn't like he couldn't watch those shows. Now, there was always, as there should be, layered themes. And there are going to be themes that a 5-year-old won't understand, but that would be great for you to watch with your 12-year-old, your 14-year-old, ranging from prejudice in all kinds of aspects. Even the Goldbergs hit on that once or twice. And also that show being written by one of the characters as he remembers his childhood back in the 80s.
Well, and that show cracks me up because when I watch it with Zach, most of the time he's asking questions. Why did the character do this? And when we watch the Goldbergs, he's like, what is that thing he's holding? And he's holding like a cassette tape or something. Like it's much more about like the trappings because he understands what's happening in the show.
And that's why it's at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's an early evening show, appropriately so, because it would be on when young children are watching with mom and dad because there's something for everybody in the family. For someone like me, I laugh at it because it's a throwback to when I was truly entering my adulthood, when I was starting my married life. So the Goldberg parents are ahead of me, but I'm somewhere between the parents and the oldest kids on that show, and I'm thinking, I remember that, I remember that hairdo, oh my God. But it's very funny, and it sort of amuses me that in 2019, we're reflecting back to 1980s as if it's some crazy long time ago.
It does kind of feel that way sometimes.
Well, it does now.
It's going to be 2020 really soon.
Yeah, really soon.
Really
like
soon.
as you're watching this, if you happen to be watching at the end of the month, it's going to be 2020 in about, let's get our watches in sync here.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I loved Blackish. I love Blackish. I still watch it. It's still on the air. Please watch it. It's a wonderful show. And it gives us something much more dynamic and much more current than I remember when Cosby, for the Cosby Show first came out. You had dad and mom who were professionals, but there was still a clowning of a certain way, and
Yeah.
there was still, things happening from when the Cosby Show was airing in the 80s. This show, I think, elevates it.
Yeah. When I think about Blackish, I do think, you have to look at the Cosby Show as kind of the beginning of, first of all, showing a black middle class family.
Or upper middle class
Or
family.
upper middle class
Because they're
family on TV.
professionals.
Yeah.
They're professionals.
And you didn't really see that and those family dynamics in that way. You really didn't.
No, before
Up
that, the only
until the
family
Cosby
that
Show.
ever had been elevated to that level that was a black family were the Jeffersons by opening a cleaners.
Yeah, and there was
it was
still
a little different.
It was a different type of show.
Yes.
I think. And what Blackish does is it, for one, reaches out to families who don't get to see themselves on TV a lot,
Right.
in a positive way, frankly. But it also allows people who aren't black to think about some of the issues that they bring up on the show through the lens of comedy or through a family drama.
And the truth is, what the issues that they talk about in a humorous way, as every sitcom does, are issues I deal with, you deal with, everybody deals with. And I think that's why it resonates with so many and does so well and has regularly had Emmy nominations. Not as many as you would see on premium networks or Netflix, because they're taking another step, and Blackish is limited by being on regular network television.
Yeah. And it's not that, I also just think it's important that, for all the stuff that you and I go through and relate to, there's going to be things on that show that I can't relate to at all. And I think that is brilliant, and it's about time. Not every show needs to be exactly for me.
No.
And I can still enjoy it and learn from it, but it's kind of nice that my former students could turn on a show and see something that's more reflective of their home life for once.
Quite true. Quite true. And Blackish is so successful that it expanded and spun off. There is a show that is more geared towards the tweens, teens, and young adults called Grownish, featuring the oldest daughter in the family when she goes off to college.
Which is, again, a great connection to the Cosby Show in a different world. Like, you think about it, the
It's a
oldest
very big
daughter.
parallel.
It was, when that was announced, I was like, yes, that's exactly
And
right.
to me, that's almost like the Saved by the Bell of the 2000 teens, was because that's the audience they're getting, appropriately so. And now they've even spun off to a third show now.
Third show, yep.
Mixed Dish, featuring the young life of the mom in the family, played by Tracee Ellis Ross, Diana Ross's daughter. Yes, we know that, and she's equally talented in a whole different venue.
And she's no stranger to sitcoms either, because she did Girlfriends for a while on, I want to say it was either BET or UPN. She had her show for a while.
Correct.
So when she moved here, it was like, oh, finally, like a wider audience for her. I was very, very excited.
And of course, given the accolades for it as well. She's had nominations.
Absolutely.
She's been recognized. She does wonderful things. She's hosted shows. And we love seeing where she came from, because she comes to become this super professional and have this wonderful family that's as well adjusted as a family can be. And where she came from. And Mixed Dish takes the viewpoint of what happens when you have an interracial couple.
Yeah. And further back in history.
Further back in time, when it wasn't unacceptable, but it wasn't as, I didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
It sort of takes that and moves it back somewhere. I know one of the shows that you also wanted to talk about, which was more dramatic, reflecting the movie it came from, which had comedy but yet was a drama, Parenthood. The TV show Parenthood.
Love the TV show Parenthood. I could talk about it forever. It was one of those shows for me that never, ever, ever got the recognition it deserved. For the comedic performances from Dax Shepard, from the dramatic performances by pretty much everyone in the
Everybody.
cast. There was not a scene in that show that I look back and I go, that wasn't really well acted. Every scene was well acted. I cried on a regular basis. It was the This Is Us before This Is Us.
Before
for me.
This Is Us.
And to be fair, it's the same showrunner, so it makes sense.
Okay.
They follow, but I mean, the concept of the show, which is essentially this one family and the 3 siblings
And the generations
and the
also.
generations.
And the generations, which is why it was great for
Yeah.
family viewing, because there was something for everybody to relate to.
And every episode you would see the trials and tribulations and triumphs. Trials, tribulations, triumphs. I like that.
Good. The 3
Right?
T's.
That was pretty good. The 3 T's.
The 3 T's.
Of the grandparents, the parents, their children, their teenage children, and their young children. And it just never felt to me like any one of these groups was being pushed aside for the other.
And you're right. You're right. Because what happened is they made sure everybody was involved in every issue. While certainly there were certain players that were the front burner players.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it cycled, which was nice about there were different cyclical stories where one brother would be in the spotlight and then one sister, and then something happened to the young child, and so it would kind of cycle in and out, but no one was ever ignored, and they all clearly cared for each other. And one of the things that I liked about the show more than anything was that it was messy, but love was there. Like they never shied away from the fact that you can absolutely love someone and still have a really rough time in your relationship with them.
And what I liked about that was I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie by a long shot, but it is a favorite movie of mine. When I see it aired on television, I like to tune into it because that's exactly what it did. It showed that life was messy, but unconditional love from a family is still unconditional love.
Yeah.
And you could be angry, but you don't stop loving.
Yeah. And if you think about all of the hot button issues that shows try to tackle,
Right.
sometimes in a season, they dealt with questions of sexuality, of divorce, of adoption, of interracial relationships, of special needs, children with special needs, of all of dementia and getting older, and all of these different concerns for really like every single level of life.
2 other shows that piggyback that theme, which are also current in the 2000s, and actually, I would say I think are running currently, because I think Life in Pieces is still going to air. It's currently not airing.
Yeah, I love that show.
I'm not sure because it keeps popping in and out.
Yeah, I'm very confused about Life in Pieces and whether it really exists or I'm just imagining it.
Right. Right now, the show Life in Pieces is a little bit in pieces, so
Yeah,
we're not
it's very
100%
confusing.
sure. But it's another show, once again, all-star cast where you're getting every generation, 3 generations and their mistakes, and you still care about them, and all-star cast.
And Diane West.
Yeah, well,
That's it,
and she was in Parenthood, by the way, the movie Parenthood too. So there you go.
They're just.
And then you have Modern Family, multi-generational, and now they've even added a 4th generation, which I absolutely love. That this season they added where the oldest Dunphy daughter has twins, and going through her pregnancy was hilarious because the person who they felt was probably going to be the least successful person to have a family and be stable is clearly, when you see how it's written, this character's still completely in character. This character that was a ditz and didn't go to college and did I wouldn't even call it rebellion. Just she was like, she would care more about fashion than anything else. And but it wasn't fashion in a way that you would say, oh, well, she's going to be this and that and a mover and a shaker. You would just say she cared more about which shoes she was going to wear than whether she passed a test in school. Yeah. And that was just who she was. So having children, and they had her having twins, ultimately now she makes these incredible decisions that are still completely in character, which just blows my mind because it gives you, once again, this beautiful way to sit with your family. I sit with my husband, I watch it. I could see sitting with my daughter and watching it. I could see sitting with your son and watching it.
Oh, he would love it. Phil Dunphy, he'd be cackling every 5 seconds.
Because Phil Dunphy is the geeky dad in the middle generation.
He's the geeky, goofy dad who clearly cares and loves and just, try as he might, can't get it right. He just can't.
But when he gets it right,
it's really right.
It's really right, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And there are certain themes that we've seen, and they also, like many of these shows that we've heard, Parenthood, okay, The Office, and now Modern Family, have chosen a last season.
Correct.
They want to leave not only when they're at a good place, but where the audience welcomes them into their home. Not when the audience is saying, okay, that's the last show I want to watch. Why are they filling this half hour with that?
Yeah.
Which is what they used to do on television. They used to keep a show on till it dropped off to the Nielsen ratings and plummeted to the floor.
Yeah, till the audience gave up on it as opposed to wrapping it up in a nice little bow.
And that reflects back, you know, I would give it, for example, shows like A Happy Days from years ago. That was one of the most popular shows on television, and they let it just plummet.
X-Files, same thing. 2 or 3 seasons too long. For me, The Simpsons now, same thing. Probably 7 or 8 seasons too long.
I think The Simpsons is just sitting there trying to keep up in their Guinness Book of World Records record
At this
for
point,
their
they're
longest
just
show.
shaking a magic 8 ball for the plot. Just a series of them.
Well, in that case, let's go write it tomorrow, because I have a magic 8 ball at home. I'm sure I could dig out from the 70s.
You can probably do it. Bart does something wrong. Homer goes dope.
And the show's
And there we go.
over. Right.
There we go.
Okay, so back to family viewing. And I know you wanted to also, we both wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of the Big Bang Theory and now moving into Young Sheldon. Totally family shows. There's no question about it. These are comedies, sitcoms. The Big Bang Theory was on early enough because while it may have touched on really mature topics, including the fact that one of the characters was clearly on the spectrum in some element, it still appealed to everybody.
It's a show that, okay, let's be real, it is not award-winning television. This, you know what it is, this
But
show,
it did.
But it's not the kind of show that's like written to change lives. It's just not. It's meant to amuse.
It's meant to entertain.
And amuse. And I think it does that, and it, whether you like the show or not, you can't argue that it's inappropriate. You know what I mean? I know plenty of people who just aren't a fan, but again, it's a family viewing show because, again, I could put Zach in front of it and he might laugh at a few of the silly jokes, but he's not going to laugh at the dynamics of the characters in the way that I would. But none of it's going to be inappropriate.
None of it's going to be inappropriate. And once again, when they knew that they were getting to that point, they ended the show. And I can honestly say, now, I was a Big Bang Theory fan, but not someone who would watch episodes repeatedly. That's not my personal style in that show, particularly. But when they did the final episode, they did it right. And they did it so every fan of the Big Bang Theory will fondly remember the show. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
You want your fans to say, that was great. What a wonderful, whatever many years, I don't know if it was 8 years, 10 years or something.
It's a satisfying feeling.
It feels like you brought a novel to an ending. I mean, in my brain, I can compare it to things like when you see the entire Harry Potter series, and probably 9 million of you would always know what it is. But nobody is totally unaware. But you know that it brings from Harry Potter's childhood to adulthood. And it's a satisfying finale. And J.K. Rowling even wrote the epilogue in her books. It wasn't just written for the movies, if some of you have just seen the movies, because she wanted everybody to get the satisfying ending that she wanted, So we take a show like The Big Bang Theory, and then you don't want to lose it. So what do? They add.
So they added Young Sheldon,
And
which we were not really fans of.
Yeah, if you remember last year, we were like, oh my God, what happened? Did they jump the shark? Oh no.
It just didn't work.
It didn't work last year.
But I also remember that last year you said, I think my quote was something like, you can't fill shoes that already have feet in them. You can't have another Sheldon when the one Sheldon that's already on TV is so popular.
That's right.
And I think with Big Bang Theory now off the air, young Sheldon isn't being directly compared anymore. You were able to recognize it for its own merits.
And what they've done now is they've developed the characters in young Sheldon's life much more. Not only does Sheldon have a life of his own, and we see more of what he was as a child as opposed to, and Jim Parsons still does the voiceover, talking about his childhood.
Yep.
But you see the parents, and they now have depth. You see his brother and sister now have storylines from time to time, and they have depth. You see his grandmother, who we always knew was an important person in his life from the Big Bang Theory. This is a woman with depth. And I think what they did was when the Big Bang Theory ended, it almost gave license to young Sheldon not having to worry about sticking to the storyline.
Yeah, I would agree. I think
I like the show now, by the way. I like it now.
I think it gave it some freedom to be its own show.
And it's the kind of show, once again, I could watch with anybody. If we have guests in our home who are under 10, I'm fine watching young Sheldon with them. And they like it because there's kids on the show. Now, the kids might be in middle school and high school, but there's kids on the show.
Yeah, exactly.
And they do kid things.
Yep.
You know, they'll build a snowman. They'll tease each other. They'll plan to do something sneaky and have it be funny sneaky, or they'll have a crush on somebody. All the things that kids do.
Yeah. And I think there's so many opportunities for it now to explore things that it wouldn't have had the chance to if Big Bang Theory was still on the air and just pumping out the humor and the formula that it was working with and using well for so long.
Right, because now they no longer have to compare themselves. Exactly. Some other shows I certainly don't want to miss talking about. Quickly giving a very important nod to How I Met Your Mother, to Lost, which I know your family watched every week and were like totally confused by, but still was glued to it like the rest of the country.
I'm finally coming to terms with the ending.
Okay.
It has been years, but I can finally say.
And in my home, we watched Mad Men. Full disclosure, my husband's father was from around that era and was an ad exec. So it really was a lot of fun to watch that and see the history. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of good family viewing on. It's taken a very different turn over the decades. But enjoy it. Don't let it go away because family viewing, we rarely have family time. And since there's so much viewing out there, just get your family and grab them and sit with them and watch these great shows. And from Rachel and myself, we want to wish you a very happy holiday season.
Happy holidays.
And a very, very happy new year. However you're going to celebrate, be it quiet or big, enjoy it. Enjoy it and watch some good TV because there's lots of it on now. So we say Happy New Year. Welcome to 2020 from Carolyn Talks Television.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.